And welcome to Rachel, who's looking after us today. You tell me it's your first pension board experience. Is Mark on? Has Mark joined?
He's not online yet.
No. Well, we'll kick off. So, no apologies, assuming that Mark does join.
No apologies, Chairman.
So, declarations of interest?
Yes, my wife is a deferred member of the pension scheme.
Okay. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Shall we just turn the pages for accuracy first of all? So page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9. Happy for me to sign as a correct record? Yes. Yeah, thank you. Well, on to item 4. Is this you, Jo?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this is the standard quarterly paper, and I'll just briefly run through the key points in each section. Section 1 on page 11 and the appendix on page 17 shows how the fund meets the requirements of pensions regulator. We are still amber. We have 2 new members on the pensions committee, and they have a 6-month window to complete their TPR training. So hopefully when they've done that, we'll be able to go back to green, although by then we will have a new member on the pension board who will need to complete their TPR training. So hopefully by the end of the year, we will be back to green on there. Section 2 on page 13, updates on any breaches that have happened over the quarter, and it's just the standard one acknowledging late payment or receipt of contributions, and that's covered in item 6 on the agenda. Section 3 on page 13 is for any changes to the risk register, of which there have been none over the quarter. And section 4 is the border to coast update. The next joint committee meeting's being held on the 21st of March, and I shared papers yesterday with the board. Any questions or comments can be fed back to Councillor Strengle, and he welcomes any questions anyone has that they would like him to raise at the joint committee. Section 5 on page 14, updates on the appointment of a new member to the Pensions Committee, Tom Hotchin, who came this morning. He represents the academy sector. So he's already done his one-to-one training, and we'll obviously look into doing his TPR training shortly. Section 6 on page 15 advises that Peter Jones, who's the independent investment advisor to the committee, he's stepping down. He's been advising the committee since 2011, and the committee have agreed this morning that they will review what advice they need going forwards following the publication of the Good Governance Review. Section 7 updates the board on the triennial valuation. Pleased to say we've received declarations from all of our employers confirming what they will pay over the next 3 years. The key outcomes of the valuation were discussed at the annual employers meeting in February. Section 8 advises the board of the 22-23 Public Service Governance Administration Survey that was issued in January by TPR. That's attached at Appendix C for information. That was actually sent out as a separate report because of its size, so hopefully you've all received that. All right. So that was completed by the chair of the board and finalised by myself and then sent off within the deadline period.
Can I just, was there any issues then, or are we covering that? Well, I haven't looked at it. That was all. Was it pretty?
It was very standard. It asked questions along the lines of, first of all, how many board meetings do you have? How many were attended? Did you cover things like risk, certain aspects of what you do at board meetings? I think generally it was all pretty positive. And then Roger has his opinions on whether what TPR do and whether their usefulness or otherwise. But I don't think there was anything contentious in any of the responses that went back. So.
It is a very long return, but I think it's all about governance really, and I think we go out of it pretty well. Yeah, what they're interested in is how many meetings a year, how many members on the board, what's the attendance like, etc.
Do we get, do we get, as a fund then, do we get a response back? Do we get a collective view of from the returns that have gone in?
Yeah, I think that's normally towards the end of autumn that comes out, and I think I have shared it with the committee, the board previously. And then finally, obviously, as you're aware, the structure of the meetings that we'll be having with the committee and board will be changing. So there will be, unless board members choose to attend all 8 committee meetings as opposed to the 4 that we currently have as quarterly updates, there will be some areas that you potentially will receive reports on but won't hear some of the presentation. So what we're looking to do is bring in as a regular item into this report is the agenda items from the committee meetings previously, to see if there's any issues or questions that you would like to raise that we can then answer. Hopefully that it will reduce some of the duplication of papers going forwards where you hear it at the committee and then it's repeated to you once we start the new structure in July. But any areas requiring clarity, you'll still be able to have that input and we can discuss at the board. So they're listed there under section 9. So if there's any questions anyone has, please do feel free to ask.
It might just be worthwhile asking about the June meeting. David and I were discussing it over lunch, which is going to be in Leeds, and I said, well, I'm not going, particularly if you hired a minibus. But that's all right then. But no, I guess we didn't know whether we were welcomed or
yeah,
not welcomed.
It's an open meeting. It will be an open meeting. It will be broadcast. Because we have to, because it's a committee meeting. The board are more than welcome to come up and join us. I think the committee meeting, it will be an investment and stewardship meeting, so not an area that the board covers. However, the training session and the presentations that will follow that will look at obviously the governance of Border to Coast, the compliance, and perhaps give some reassurance or more background into how Border to Coast is managed and run as our asset manager. So you are more than welcome, and I will include you in the email that goes out when we look to arrange it. We're not looking to get a minibus, but we will organise train travel as required. Luckily, it is right next to the train station. It's a 5-minute walk, so yeah, you will all more than welcome to come and join us at that. And it will be a full day, probably 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock or something along those lines.
Sorry, Roger. All I was going to say then, so the training aspect, Joe, the if I may say, the evidence of what training you may have taken will be quite useful from that. If it's not the committee itself, the formal meeting, what comes following that would be useful for us to go to.
Yeah, I think you would find it of interest and provide that oversight of the governance of Border to Coast. I think it will assist in your understanding of that if you're able to make it. Obviously, the committee, the formal committee meeting will be held and then stop, and then it will be bringing in various people from Border to Coast as requested by the committee, or if you yourselves have any areas that you think would be useful for yourselves and the committee to hear, do please get in touch with us as we'll be looking to organise that agenda over the coming weeks.
The fact that they're going to talk about governance at Border to Coast persuades me to go. And the mere fact that you're not using a minibus. That's the key.
Just ask one question, just out of interest really, because it was an outstanding item for so many papers. The committee member who hadn't completed the toolkit and was outstanding all the time, has he now completed it, or has he just left because of the new structure?
The committee member has been replaced by Councillor Paula Ashley Morris, who was unfortunately not able to attend today. But yes, he has stepped down and been replaced by a new county councillor. I'll be happy to answer any other questions. That was all I was going to say on the paper. Thank you.
Sorry. Mark, any questions?
Hi, yes. Sorry, my apologies. I'm coming out of a bit of a heavy cold today and decided to stay in. In terms of the Border to Coast, I seem to remember seeing yesterday on LinkedIn, haven't they just been given some award or national recognition? It's something, as I say, Joe, it's something I saw on LinkedIn. They've been put forward for an award or something?
Yeah, I think they've been put forward for 2. I did read it last night, but I can't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah,
I
think
but yes, they are being recognised for the work they're doing in some areas. But apologies, I can't recall exactly what.
Yeah. I saw it and I thought, and again, like you, I think I was flicking through and I sort of briefly caught my eye. And I just wondered if you had any more details about it. But thanks. Thank you.
I can find out and I can just send an email around to share that information.
Yeah, because I think for me that gives me a little bit of sort of confidence that sort of in their industry other people are recognising them. You know when you see local authorities or councils or organisations sort of being recommended for awards, it does offer you a kind of sort of a bit of extra surety that their peers are recognising them. Thanks. Sorry, I finished. Sorry.
All right, thanks, Mark.
So I've just had a look on LinkedIn and it says we've been shortlisted for not 1 but 2 awards at the Professional Pensions UK Pensions Award, finalist for both the Equity Manager of the Year and the Alternatives and Private Markets Manager of the Year awards.
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks. Thank you.
Anything else? No? So the recommendation is Board consider and discuss the report and agree whether any action or additional information is required. Well, we've certainly considered it. No additional action. Okay. Let's move on to item 5, which is the Pensions Administration report from Matt. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everyone. Right, this is the admin report for the period October to December 22. On page 24-25, you can see a breakdown of the KPIs. I think broadly they're very good. There are a few KPIs that we didn't meet the target. The reasons are there, and I think there's three areas really that have caused these delays in processing the work. First of all, if it's work that doesn't have to be processed today, it's got a long date on it, or there's no payment or value attached to it, its priority isn't high. So we would look at prioritising other work first. Secondly, in certain areas we have had higher volumes, certainly in estimates like retirement estimates, and also retirement cases themselves, where the volumes are up. So it takes us longer to get through those. And lastly, we have had, as you're aware, a year-long rolling recruitment program, which has largely been successful, but we are still training some of those staff. I would expect some of those staff now to be experienced enough to be producing high levels of work and high quality of work, but those that have joined us within the last 3 or 4 months would still be trained and trained by people with the high set skills. So we'll monitor that, but broadly I'm hoping over the next quarter we actually improve on the performances. Looking through the report, membership is still broadly increasing. That in itself will bring additional work. The surveys, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag here, point 3.1. We've had a response rate of 15.3%, which I think is much better. I think over previous board meetings have been as low as 9 point something. which concerned me. I would expect a spread between 10 and 30%, so we've got a good cross-section of your membership. What disappoints me slightly is the satisfaction score at 81.3. Nothing to worry about, but it could just be that this period we've just sent surveys to people that perhaps are leaving and want refunds and deferreds, rather than those that are retiring, where we would expect to get more positive results. Employer training was quite busy over this period. All virtual webinars and recorded, so they could be re-watched, but there's been about 5 or 6 sessions there produced. Point 4 on the IDRPs, I'm not going to go through them all, stage 1 and stage 2s, because with the exception of one, they've all been completed. We have no new or fresh IDRPs, which I think is really encouraging, a really positive thing. In fact, since the year or so that I've been here, these IDRPs have been falling in numbers. The one that's outstanding, it seems to have been a slightly odd case. It's the refusal or appeal against the refusal to award a nil health pension. We'd been asking about additional medical information. Usually additional medical information would be assessed as part of the process. It appears actually there isn't any, because the member in question has not given permission for us to access GP and medical records, which to my mind is slightly odd. But that was as of yesterday, so I expect our response will follow quite swiftly. Further admin work, well, we've had 3 employers join this period, but there's been a lot more work on a further 8 that will be joining maybe joining over the coming months. Staffing good, says there on the service centre, 7 vacancies. I think that is currently down to 3, and we still have 1 vacancy in the employer relation team. AVC arrangements and the audit that's been undertaken is effectively managed. The risks have been effectively managed, and the 4 recommendations have now been implemented. My pension, there are some slides that I'll go through after this, but my pension, we have been slow to provide some information that the board has requested, and so is our software provider. So what I will talk about for a couple of minutes afterwards will explain what West Yorkshire have done. This is important when we consider that we've now got 41.64% of your active members and over 31% of deferreds and nearly 40% of pensioners now all logging on to the portal so that we can exchange data with them digitally. The shared service budget, I won't elaborate too much, except so in almost every section there is an overspend or a projected overspend. This is really due to the cost of living, increased prices, increased staffing, cost of recruitment, cost of the IT, cost of training those staff. But looking at the cost for next year, it's still very reasonable at £18.68 per head, probably about £20 per scheme member head, cheaper than any of our competitors. So, and it also includes the cost for McLeod and dashboards. Pre-Christmas, we won the Good Governance Award at the LAPF Investments, and next week at the Pension Age Awards, we have been shortlisted for 3 separate awards. So before we have a look at the slides that I have, any questions?
Any questions?
Sorry. Those 4 employers exiting, that seemed quite a lot from previously, I think. Was there no particular issues? Was there any exit payment or credit issues? That was anything?
I'm not aware of anything. That's probably Joe's area.
It's just general end of contract. And then there's been town or parish council that's chosen to no longer has any staff to put in. So there's some small surplus payments that, should the employer come back to us, they will receive.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Can I just ask you, Matt, on the key performance indicators, and the ones I'm going to pick on are low level, but just from a matter of interest, the the deferred benefits into payment quotes and then the interfund linking are taking probably twice as long in the average days. So are any of those, are they backing up for you? Is that work increasing? Is the backlogs getting higher? Are you getting through them? That's really what I'm saying.
We are getting through them. With the linkings, that is to some degree out of our control because we're liaising with other funds, yeah, whether they're interlinkings or traditional IFAs, so that we might not have all the data. The deferreds, yeah, at times that they will back up. But these are both areas where they were significantly under-resourced about a year ago, and we've added the training. So my hope is that, well, there's two here really, is first of all that our inexperienced staff are trained, our experienced staff go back, if you like, to the coalface and start, you know, increasing their volumes. But secondly, we are still doing some work on resource planning and trying to identify exactly that. Have we got true backlogs? Does it ebb and flow? You know, is there something, you know, do we need to change how we do something? Until we get those figures, we don't entirely know, or at least I don't entirely know because I'm not on the teams. But we're not just sitting around just waiting for them to back up. We are looking at this on a weekly basis. I contacted all the managers yesterday for an update, which hasn't come through yet.
Or the reason I'm asking that, I mean, as from you have concerns. I don't mean specifically, but what's coming. That's all. You've got the McLeod work we've talked about, all the. So that's work that's coming into the system, but you've got work already
that
you're trying to manage. That was the only reason I'm asking. Is that
it's a relevant question. It really is, and we've looked at some new reports that are a bit rough and ready at the moment, and they might identify, you know, how much or how many processes we're creating on a monthly basis. That's not the full story because we need to know how many we're completing in a monthly period. But of course, those that we complete in a month didn't necessarily start this month because they could have been, as you know, 3, 4, 6 months ago. So there is some continual work. Yes, there are broad concerns because a lot of this work will require support of IT, and IT are working with dashboards, and IT are working with McLeod, and IT are talking to the TPR. So, you know, not everything is going to be done today. I think the important thing is we are aware and we're confident and we're trying to develop.
I mean, all right, I'm content that what I might call the urgent, the more, shall we say, the ones that are not so urgent are backing up a little bit. The ones that we would expect to see are going through okay, aren't they? And I do take that on board.
Good. I hope so. I think going back to the IDRPs, I think that probably is one way to determine whether we're being successful on administration, because if we are getting less and less complaints, there must be something we're doing that's very good.
Anything else? Let's move on to the slides.
Slides, okay, right. So these were called a presentation. Oh, hang on, is that working? Right, well, it seems to have gone. Right, there we go. So this was called a presentation today. It isn't. This is just a selection of slides, and I'm trying to find a resolution to. I said this morning as well. It was at least a year old, but I think the request is now 2 years old. I was corrected by one of my colleagues. Yeah, absolutely. So the request was, can we identify if scheme members had been accessing their annual benefit statements on the portal? And the short answer was no, so we contacted our software provider, and it just didn't go anywhere. And so out of probable frustration, I started asking questions, and we've come up with this. What we can see is you've got over 8,000 scheme members that are registered on the portal, and then we can see how many have logged in within since ABSs were produced, and of those, how many of them actually logged in, if you like, the peak period immediately after ABSs were released. And then the two columns on the side show that they haven't logged in this period or never logged in at all. There's 61 people that registered for the portal and haven't been near it. So we can see that there is some traffic, some interest in using the portal. because I'm not entirely sure how we can show this, this doesn't seem to be working again. Let's just try again. Don't know where I'm supposed to be pointing it, to be honest. No, it doesn't want to work now. Are you able to do it up there? Yes, thank you. What we can show here is hits on the portal. So the blue line shows how many people have accessed the portal, and we can see at its height, it's just 6,500 hits in July. The brown line shows us how many have gone to the My Documents page where the annual benefit statements are stored. So we are making a bit of assumption, but the assumption is that they know they're getting an annual benefit statement, so they've gone onto the portal during the time that we release them, and we don't release them just all together. We receive them, employer by employer as we comply with or complete their month 12 returns. And we can see that they're quite high, hitting in July or June again over 3,000 hits. Then if we look down just to see, well, what does it really mean compared to another period? At Christmas, we were getting 1,500 hits, just before Christmas, and 500 or 600, on their ABS or documents pages. That increased throughout the Christmas period, December into January, which suggests to me that people are assessing their pension provision, maybe starting to make decisions with regards to their benefits for the following year. And Christmas, or the new year, is traditionally a good time, a busy time to retire. Do we have the next slide, please? We also did some work on websites. So what we can see here is how people actually access the portal. So we know that they go to My Pension via our website or a formal letter or link. That's sort of over 65%. I was quite encouraged to see nearly a quarter of people actually have the My Pension details saved on their laptop so they can access it directly. I don't know what use this information is, but it's where we start to get a feel for perhaps what our membership does and what they may want from us. Can we have the next slide, please? And here we are looking at just hits on the website generally during the ABS production through June and August, so we can assume they're going to the website, then going to the portal, then going to their document page. And then we can see that when we look into the autumn, when all this is finished, that the hits dramatically drop from their highest of almost 1,500 to about a height of about 200. So we can see that annual benefit statement production is prompting activity on these portals and websites. And if we have the next slide. And again, this is just showing the data in a different way, how people actually search to find My Pension portal. We had a Google search, this thing called paid search, and they ran a campaign over a couple of months, and we were able to identify where people were coming. So every time they Googled My Pension or West Yorkshire Pension Fund or Lincolnshire, the first thing that would come up on the search engine would be My Pension portal, and then we can see that there's direct access. And we can see over the period how access peaked and then dropped right off as we went into the autumn. And I think that's the last slide. Yes. So it's not really a presentation. It's what we were able to pull out just thinking about the question that was asked all those months ago. We are recruiting to a web developer, and I understand that maybe part of that person's role could be developing this data into a dashboard where we could get monthly information. Not sure what that would be. That might be something that you could direct us to, or we can come back with further information. We could do page hits. So if we had 500 people hit the documents page in any one month, we would get an alarm and the data would come to us. And then we could put that in reports and bring this to the board. So I've got a completely open mind. I've just tried to demonstrate that we've gone away and we've had a think, and although it's a bit delayed, we can do something, and it may be a question of what would you like us to bring back to the board?
Well, my recollection of all this, Matt, and this is, it was before your time, but West Yorkshire, it was, I don't think they necessarily gave the members a choice. They just said, right, from here on in, benefit statements will be electronic.
Yep.
And our concern was that about 66%
Yep.
weren't necessarily seeing their benefit statements. So that was when it was first raised.
Yep.
And I guess that is still my concern. I don't know whether it's Dave and the other members of the pension board, but that is my concern, that for those that are not IT friendly and what have you, they're not getting an annual benefit statement. They've got access to it, but if they're not registered, they've not got access to it. So that was the issue. That's why we raised it.
Yeah.
And that's why the Civica came in, and you got a quote from them saying that.
Oh, that was ridiculous.
Yeah. So that's the background.
I think it's a very good question. I think the only thing that I would comment, and it's only a comment, is we never knew if our members ever opened their annual benefit statement when we sent it to them. I do know of occasions where they've called up and said, ever so sorry, I've thrown it in the bin, can I have another one? I didn't realise what it was. That wasn't this fund. So that in itself is a small example. But I do get the point, though. It's physically been posted out to them. We assume by that it's landed on their doormat. Now, what they do with it then, we don't know, but it's there. We need to encourage more portal use, and it is going up. What I would actually say is if people want to opt out of that digital process, then all they need to do is notify us and they can have a hard copy paper annual benefit statement. They are written to before it goes on the portal, so they are aware that it's there. So, when I say written to, that could be a letter, it could be an email, and if they're registered, I think they can get a notification through the portal anyway. So, is there a difference between having a letter to saying your annual benefit statement's on the portal, or having the actual hard copy annual benefit statement on your Mac? Because you don't necessarily have to open the annual benefit statement. Whatever the answer is, that we obviously we can't get to the bottom of it today, and I think that there's some good points in that, is how you would like us to proceed with providing some of this data, if at all, and if you do, is it going to be at every board meeting, 6 monthly, annually? Is this of use? Do you want us to look at developing it?
Well, if it's not going to change anything, I'm not sure how much use it is in a way. I mean, it's useful to see it, Matt. Sorry, I don't mean.
That's
but
fine.
in terms of if it's not going to change any actions from the pension fund, I don't really see that much benefit in it, unless anybody else thinks different.
No, I mean I'm not sure it's going to be of great benefit, if I may say, either.
Oh, Mark?
Yes, thanks, Roger. Thanks for the presentation. Just listening to it, obviously I'm guessing that if people access stuff electronically on the portal, as opposed to being sent hard copies and whatever, there's going to be a reduction in cost, because I'm guessing it's going to be a smaller unit cost to stick something on the portal to have something on the hard copy. I mean, legally, I'm guessing we have to provide access to a copy in one format or the other. But going forward, isn't electronic records going to be the ultimate end game, or would we still be in the business in a number of years' time of still using paper copies? Because I was thinking about changing technology and also the way people now access information. Thanks.
There is a legal requirement, isn't there?
There's a legal requirement to provide an annual benefit statement. It's
To active members.
yeah, well, and deferred members in the LGPS. So, to that end, they don't say whether it should be paper or it should be digital. It's felt that, in theory, the more efficient, cost efficient as well, way to do that is digital. So it's an interesting point about how we access data, because I mean, I'm a bit of a dinosaur and I tend to access most data through a laptop, but my kids access their data through their phone.
I mean, I guess my worry, this is a personal worry, but it would knock onto Joe's team and you. So let's say we have a member X year's end says, I've never received any benefit statements. I should have done this. And let's say they put in a complaint to the Ombudsman or what have you. The Ombudsman would then say, well, what have you been doing?
Yep.
Well, we put them on electronically and that's it. So that is my concern, that someone a long way down the line will come, I've never had any of those. If I'd have known that, I would have done A, B and C. But maybe the Ombudsman would rule in your favour. I don't know.
Well, I don't know, but I think that would depend on what we have on the records, what we have as a policy, what we have documented. Because the irony is, although we're talking about just that piece of data, to be able to send that piece of data digitally, we need to have that piece of data and that piece. Do you know what I mean? We have to show that every year that we've contacted them to notify them that they've got that there. So it almost seems a daft thing to do. You might as well just send them a paper copy. But so we have that. But it's very difficult to know what we should do. The end game has got to be digital, I think. I think because of costs alone.
Joe's going to tell us what we should do.
No, I just wanted to add a little bit, because I think it's wider than that. Sorry, I wasn't on. I think it's wider than that, because one of the things that West Yorkshire have been working on is developing the estimate option to be able to do that on the online portal. So anything we can do to encourage more people to use the online portal is a benefit, and I think that's something that, you know, we're working with employers and need to do more work to get the active members using that, and then also trying to get the deferred members on as well. I think in putting it online, it rules out identity theft. So there are certain scams that it will potentially stop happening. So I think there are security benefits in accessing things online only. I know you could say there's cybersecurity risk, but put that to one side. It's easy for a piece of post to be mislaid. I think I was just going to say exactly what Matt had said about actually if on that individual's record there was a letter, there was something saying a letter went notifying them that which it will do that their annual benefit has gone online, or there'll be an email went notifying them. I think the Ombudsman will say, well, you were notified, you chose not to opt out, so it was continued to be put there. I think the other thing is just looking at the bigger picture is we do have to be monitoring our carbon footprint going forward, so the less we're posting, that all lands into that, and the cost. So I think there's a number of things that add up all together to say actually we should be looking digitally as our first option. However, we have to accept, particularly because we're in pensions and we will have some people that perhaps have no access to IT, some of our older pensioners perhaps, we need to still have that option of paper copies at this time. But I think over time the expectation is it will move more and more digital in all that's offered.
So I guess the message is we've got to actively encourage the members to register on the website, etc., etc.
Well, I think that's right, Chairman. I mean, the bigger picture, and Joe's alluded to some of it about the estimates online. I mean, the ultimate end game is we do everything online, with the exception of people who can't or want to opt out. So if somebody wanted to retire, through the portal, we get their elections, we get copies of birth certificates, we got their signatures. Digital signatures are still a bit contentious at the moment. You know, and then once we say, okay, you want to go, we send them all the information, they go, yes, it's paid into their bank. And perhaps, to a certain degree, much of that may be able to be automated, providing the files are correct and there's nothing contentious within them. But that's the bigger picture. It's a long journey, though. And as we go through that journey, these interesting but not very, useful at the moment, data that I was showing, will become more important because it will show how we are encouraging people and it will show how they are accessing their information. So I wouldn't like to take the conversation off the table, but perhaps we could be a bit just reactive to this board. If you do want something, even whether you want something annual, because it's just interesting, whatever, we're happy to look at it. And if there is anything that is developed and we want to use it right across our clients and our partners, then we could bring that back to you anyway.
I think my suggestion, Matt, would be, I mean, I'm with Jerry, don't do anything special for us. Perhaps do that once a year, because I think it's pretty interesting. But in the meantime, you know, we encourage active members in particular to register. I don't think we can do much more.
Yeah, okay.
Kim?
The only comment I have is that the website isn't that user-friendly currently. I got locked out because I put the wrong password in, and it took a few days to get a reset from email. And also I was going to say was the plans to do the estimates, because I know Devon County Council do, because my mum's just retired, and you can play around with your lump sums and pension to see what works out best for you, rather than ringing up somebody.
We're working on the website, so that's always being developed. So that's all I can say on that at the moment. The estimate or modular, there has been different, or modular, there have been different versions around, and I think it does depend largely on where the benefits are. I might have a dip into and have a look at Devon and have a look. But they're different versions, and they're based on different software, because we got Haywoods and Civica and stuff. But let me have a look and see what there is. It's always good. We need to develop. Yeah.
Right, anything else on the pensions admin report? The recommendation, this is activity and performance of the ambulance service during the last quarter, and we'll perhaps minute those two things. Actively encourage. Sorry. Sometimes it didn't come on. So we'll actively encourage, and we'll monitor things on an annual basis, see how many hits, etc. Happy with that? In which case we'll move on to item 6, which is the employer monthly submissions update. That's you, Claire.
It is, thank you. So this is just the standard quarterly update on late or incorrect employer submissions. And today's report covers the third quarter of 22-23. The fund monitors closely employer compliance with their statutory responsibility to pay over their member contributions. And contributions should be received by the 19th of the month following their payroll. The fund classes an employer as late if either their cash or supporting data is received beyond this date. Details of the number of late payments and data submissions are set out in Table 1 on page 54. There's generally good compliance from employers during the quarter, but you can see that there was a spike in December in late cash contributions when 7 employers failed to pay by their deadline. 4 of these payments came from one payroll provider who was late with their own payment and payment for 3 of their clients. There are large employers within the fund, 3 district councils and their service provider, and they've all been reminded of their responsibilities to pay by the 19th. Turning to Table 2, an employer who misses the fund's deadline 3 out of 6 months will be fined unless they can issue extenuating circumstances. There were 6 fines issued to employers during the quarter, 4 of these relating to hangover issues from 2 payroll providers, which were discussed at length at the meeting from quarter 2 and are summarised at paragraph 1.6 in the report. The other 2 fines appear to be isolated cases, and no further issues have been identified with these employers. I'm very happy to take any questions on the report.
Any questions?
Yeah, just one really. I just saw it now. You said in paragraph 1.7, if occurrence of late contributions worsen, officers will consider whether further action needs to be taken at a fund level. What sort of action could that actually be? I mean, other than fines, which obviously we talked about.
So in the past, where we felt that employers, where performance has dropped off, we've been in touch with everybody, just reminding them of their responsibilities. And obviously, because some use payroll providers, if they're late, then we'll be in touch with the payroll provider and the employer. But often, if we're not experiencing any problems with them, then actually the employer doesn't hear from us at all. So it's an opportunity for us just to be in touch with everybody to remind them of their responsibilities and what our expectations are.
In relation to the 3 district councils, presumably that was the same payroll provider, was it?
Yeah, it's you can see, and they're in that list as well, it's PSPS Limited, who are providing services to East Lindsey, South Holland and Boston. I've picked it up with them, and they had a problem with their AP system, so they couldn't release any payments on the 19th, and I think they paid us just a few days later. It was over a weekend, but they paid us very shortly in the next week when that was resolved and they could release payments.
When it was discussed this morning, Joe and Claire, do you remember 2 or 3 years ago when it was worse than this? I actually sent a letter out. I mean, I don't know whether it's worth sending another letter to the employers.
I mean, I think for me this year there are some that December figure, but we've had a couple of very specific cases, those 2 payroll providers which were accounting for 6 employers during that first part of the year. So the actual number of cases is quite low if you put those 2 very specific issues to one side. I think at the time when that was done, I think that was incredibly helpful because we were just getting that low-level background every single month of people who were late. I don't feel that we're in that position just at the moment.
Okay, I'll be guided by you.
May I just add a comment, really? I would think that the vast majority of the employers are aware, aren't they, of their sort of responsibilities. So it's more often than not, like you're saying, it was a system problem. But when you contact, say in this case Boston, I'll pick Boston just as the top of the list. Who do you go to? I mean, you go to the payroll provider, and do you go again to, and you have a contact?
Yeah.
Who that might be?
So each of the employers we've got 3 contacts for them: a payroll contact, a finance contact, and a strategic contact. And they're all held by West Yorkshire and are kept up to date because that is the prime way for us to communicate with them. So yes, when it comes to something like that, although their payroll contact might be somebody at PSPS, so their payroll provider, their strategic and finance contacts are likely to be with the authority itself, and we will make sure that when we're going out to let them know, we'll be going to a payroll provider and to the employer as well.
Just as a matter of interest, Michelle, I mean, do they still have the CFO's group?
Links Finance Officer Group,
Yes.
still strong and going, yes, yeah. Only one Section 151 officer from the 3 districts, so they're sharing.
Oh, I see.
They're sharing their
Right.
senior.
I didn't know whether it was worth your while giving them all a rocket, but anyway, if there's only one there.
The thing about the 3, it's the South East Lincolnshire Alliance, I think it's called, isn't it? The 3 districts that are formed together, and that hence why they've got their back office functions joined together as well. They've got just one Section 151 officer now. That's Christine Marshall, I think. Yeah. So, say for LCC, that split of division would be our payroll contact is Serco, our strategic advisor is HR, LCC HR, and obviously finance is us. But no, it's I think, as Claire said, I think we hold out the big guns till we really need them.
Okay.
Probably.
No, that's fair enough. Okay. Anything else on this one? The recommendation is board considers the report, discusses if there are any further actions. Well, we've discussed that and decided we'll take Claire's advice and hope that it improves next year. Happy with that? Yeah. Next item, temporary bank accounts. Is that you?
That'll be me. Right, okay, so temporary bank accounts. Just to remind everybody why we have them. 2 reasons. Firstly, our deferred members, as they once they've approached their normal retirement age and are entitled to payment of their benefits unreduced, we sometimes by that time have lost touch with them. They've moved, they've not been in contact with us, they're not registered on the portal, so we're unable to actually pay them their pension, so we pay that pension into a bank account until such a time as we can trace them and pay it to them. And the other reason is for refunds of contributions. Any scheme member, or usually a scheme member I should say, that leaves within 2 years, is entitled to a refund of their contributions with an adjustment made for tax. And the scheme rules are very unhelpful at the moment because they demand that we pay this refund to these scheme members within 5 years of leaving. Now often when they leave an employer, they leave their address and then they've gone. And then from that first day, they've gone. We can't find them. So what we do is we create another bank account for them and it remains there until we can trace them. We try to chase them through national fraud initiatives. We're using tracing agencies. We actually occasionally go out on the road to try and contact them, actually physically knock on their door. We write to them, or everything that you would expect to try and chase them. And looking at the last 3 months, the pensioners' temporary bank account, I think we've done quite well. We've reduced the unpaid pensions from 36 to 23. And there's just shy of £33,000 in those accounts. So I think we've done quite a good job at finding those people. Not quite the same story when we look at the refunds. These are generally people with, it's not even a benefit. When we talk about dashboards later, these won't even appear on the dashboard either, because there isn't actually an entitlement to a pension. It's simply an entitlement to a return of their contributions. And that's increased over the period from 466 members or ex-members to 526. And the balance has risen from 59,000 to 79, nearly £80,000. They are sort of £500 and £600 balances that we owe them. They are entitled to them. The biggest problem we have, even if we can find them, if they're not prepared to complete the paperwork and make the elections to receive their payments, we can't pay them. And there are many reasons for that, and some of that is down to benefits that they are receiving. We will continue to do that work and report on them. And I think there's not, until the regulations are changed on the refunds, I'm afraid I think those values will increase. We're optimistic that the refund regulation will change retrospectively, but with everything else, like the cloud, etc., care revaluation, removal of the death grant cap, it seems never to get to the top of the pile, but we will bring that information and update you if and when it happens. Any questions?
Any questions? I agree. I think, in terms of the pensioners, I think there's been improvement there, so that's good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's probably the most important, because there's genuine benefits for life. So I think that's where our resources should lay.
And for me, I have less sympathy with those employees who've left who can't be bothered to complete a piece of paper. I don't know what you're going to do now. But you have made progress on the pensioners. There were one or two big amounts.
Yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. So we'll see what happens over the coming months, but that's where our priority lies with the pensions.
Nothing else? So note the report and perhaps report in 6 months' time?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, thank you. Item 8, pension dashboard. I think that's you as well, Matt.
Me again. Right. I'll try to summarise dashboards in general and where we are at the moment. Particularly if people are not sure. Pension dashboards it's a big agenda item for the government, essentially. They want all pension providers, public sector and private sector, to share, if you like, on a portal again, scheme member data. So that member, on any kind of device, whether it be a phone or it be a laptop, can access the dashboard. They can input their information. They can find a previous scheme or administrator. They will know the administrator's contact details, and they will know some information about their pension benefit, which should be a deferred pension benefit. At that point, they can then contact the administrator, and then we can take the story from there. Sounds very simple. It sounds very simple, but it involves at the moment 43,000, broadly, 43,000 different schemes and 52 million scheme members. Now, that sounds big enough, 52 million people, but when you consider that many people who have lost their pensions, let's use that word, they've lost it, they can't remember where it is, etc., because they've changed jobs over the years, may have multiple pensions. I suspect that the data that will eventually be uploaded over the next year or two will be nearer to 100 or 150 million different pension scheme benefits, which is quite frightening. Now, to make sure that all pension providers meet this requirement, it is in legislation and it has been since October last year. You have the DWP creating departments like MAPS. We have the pensions regulator ensuring that there is guidance and working with providers. And there's now, the latest guidance shows that there will be fines or sanctions placed upon those that either breach data, it's not correct, it goes to the wrong people, we release payments to the wrong person, between £5,000 and £50,000. And for non-compliance, there's also another set of sanctions that range between £5,000 and £50,000. So this is treated very importantly by the government. The bad news for administrators and pension funds is we are implementing this at the same time that we are trying to rid our schemes of age discrimination, McLeod. So it's a huge amount of work, and the timing is critical, because if we're asked to put all this information on a dashboard before we've completed McLeod, we're only going to repeat that process to put the correct updated information on there. And to be clear what the information will be, it's likely to be what's on an annual benefit statement, and it will be there for 12 months until the next annual benefit statement is released. There will be some changes to that if someone has a transfer in, if someone goes from active to deferred, if someone goes from active deferred to a pensioner, that information will then be taken out because pension information is not included on the dashboard. The good news, if it is good news, is that there has been an announcement that the onboarding is not working as efficiently as DWP would like. So they have announced that there is a deferment of our staging dates. That's the date when we must have the data live on the dashboard. What they haven't told us is any further information. So West Yorkshire are going to continue with the plan that we have to start implementing from April, and we await a further announcement, which they said was before the summer recess. Whatever that means. We'd have a summer. So I think that's the summary. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions?
Well, as I said this morning, personally I'm delighted because I've certainly in various organisations like PLSA and PMI said this is ridiculous, because you're doing McLeod, private sector trying to do GMP, equalisation, which is a nightmare. So Laura Trott has listened. So I was pretty pleased when I saw that. Any other questions, comments? No?
Well, sorry, I'm sorry. I'm just going to just ask Matt. I mean, I'll be sceptical here, but is this going to happen, do you think, Matt? Have we got too far down the road, and we're not going to find again, well, we didn't really mean it. It will happen.
My personal opinion, and I think Steve Rogers is, yes, it will happen. But I have one major concern, is that there's more than one dashboard, and I can't quite get my head around more than one dashboard will work. That's my biggest concern. Yeah. So I think we just watch this space. What comes out pre-summer recess, I think, will be critical on our next steps, because it could change what we're doing. Because, as I said, I understand that the onboarding process is not working as they want it to.
Right. I think, Dave, I would say that had the previous pensions minister, Oppenheimer, what's his name? I mean, that was his baby. And I don't think there would have been a delay had he been in. I think Laura Trott has listened and taken action, but I don't think they'll take it off the
No, I think there's too much invested in it already.
Well, I only make mention as well. I mean, we listened yesterday to the budget and all what's going on, and there's, we've talked about chopping and changing on lifetime allowances and all this sort of stuff, and we've gone from it being 1.8 million to 1 million back to 1. Now it's nothing. It's everything. Isn't it? But what if? I mean, I put it this way: what if there's a general election in, say, 12 months' time, and we have a change of government? Is the new pension minister likely to say, "Oh well, it could go"? It seems a very. it's a big piece of, massive piece of work, isn't it? For the, and I know you put a lot of effort in already, but I'm just a bit of that nature.
You're quite sceptical of this, aren't you? Well, I actually think we've so far down the road and so much time and effort has been invested with all parties that it really needs to be delivered at some point, ideally after McLeod, and perhaps even after McLeod has been embedded, but that's just my personal opinion.
If not, shall we note the recommendation, discuss the report, noted progress, the delay? Move on to item 9, the Lincolnshire Pension Fund Policies Review. I think this is you, Jo.
It is, yes, thank you, Chairman. So this is the annual review of the key policies of the fund, covering the communications policy, admin strategy, governance policy and compliance statement, breaches reporting policy, code of conduct and conflicts of interest policy, and funding strategy statement. The investment strategy statement hasn't been reviewed, as this will come to the pensions committee once they've completed their strategic asset allocation review. And the stewardship code is also not included in this, as this was brought to the December meeting of the committee. So we've made amendments to 2 of those policies at this time. First one being the governance policy and compliance statement, which is attached to Appendix A. So this sets out the arrangements for the management of the fund and the extent to which the policy complies with best practice. Set out the changes to the policy in paragraph 3, and in summary these are adding in the additional co-opted member to the committee representing the academies sector, updating the role of the committee following the constitution changes that were made in December, and then updating the structure of the committee meetings and then reflecting these changes wherever they're referred to within the document. The second policy that's been updated is the funding strategy statement, and this is attached to Appendix B. This sets out the fund's approach to managing its solvency and is generally updated every 3 years in line with the triennial valuation. This has been updated as part of the 22 valuation, and it's pretty much a whole-scale change because we obviously now have a new actuary and it needs to reflect those methodologies used. All employers were consulted on this as part of their, when they received their contribution rates, and we haven't received any comments back. This was approved earlier this morning at the Pensions Committee, the new FSS. So, and also the governance, compliance and policy statement. So the other policies haven't been amended. I've included the link to where they are on the website should you wish to refresh yourselves of them, but I'll happily take any questions on the policies. Thank you.
Any questions?
2 things. One, again, you've made the same thing as last time. Section 10 is the same as Section 11, so the conflicts of interest policy is a repeat of the breaches again. It's just copied, it's nothing different. If you look at 10 and 11, same happened last time, I think. Must be a copy and paste job, Jo.
I do apologise.
It's all right. Only question, I might have asked this before, but the 17-year recovery period on deficits, is that the same as, I thought it was 20 years or 50. Is that different or is that the same as previously?
No, that has reduced by 3 years. Government Actuaries Department now does its Section 13 review on all valuation results across the LGPS, and their expectation is that deficit recovery periods come down. So for years and years, we didn't do that. It was felt we're active, we're open, we don't need to bring that deficit recovery period in, and there are different deficit recovery periods depending on the type of employer in the fund. GAD now expect to see that happening, and if you're not doing it, potentially you would get a red flag from them. So the actuaries are now generally across the board bringing those in. What will be interesting is how far they will come in, because it doesn't make sense to us for us to get down to 3 years or wherever, because as I say, if say for the council or for the districts where they're open, active, ongoing, we will keep that active membership probably for decades to come. To say they've only got 3 years, should we have a decade of falling markets and we go back to deficits because a lot of them are now recovered from this valuation, it seems a nonsense to give them, as is done in the private sector, a really short recovery time period. So I think there are questions still being asked by all the actuaries of GAD as to what is the benefit of that. Absolutely, if it's an admitted body and it's a contractor, that deficit recovery period is spread across the remaining length of the contract. So I think that common sense needs to be applied, and we'll say the discussions will continue with GAD as to at what point do you say actually we shouldn't be reducing that recovery period any further for those secured tax raising bodies.
So is the 17 years recommended by GAD for LGPS funds, or is and has it changed because of the new actuary coming in? Is that the reason it's come down by the 3 years, or is 17 years now recognised for public sort of sector funds, or is it, again, is it arbitrary-ish?
No, the 20 years that it was at with Hyman's, had GAD not been saying you need to bring it down, Barnett's would have still done 20 years for the larger scheduled bodies. Some funds may do 25 years. That's a discretion that is set within the fund with the actuary. There's a point at which you push out that far that it's not reasonable. So a 30-year deficit recovery period. There were times when employers had very large deficits and would happily have liked that spreading out over a much longer period. But obviously the interest that's built up in not paying off that deficit makes it not worthwhile spreading it out beyond a reasonable period. So 25 years was probably about the LGPS average. But as I say, everyone now is bringing wherever they were at, bringing that down. Some funds started doing that at the last valuation, so may well be down to 14 years now if they started at 20. But this is the first time at Lincolnshire we've done that, and that is because of the additional pressure from GAD to make sure that you do that.
It's just why 17. GAD haven't said 17. That's just a reduction that the actuaries think is reasonable.
Yeah, it's historical based. The reasonable time for most of the scheduled bodies was 20 years. So for colleges, it was 15 years. For admitted bodies, it was the contract period length. So it depended on, it's around the risk of the body as well as to how long do you want to allow them to cover any deficit, because there's a risk to the fund if you give that too long a period.
Any other questions? No? So, recommendation is board discuss, consider the report, review the fund's governance policy, compliance statement and funding strategy statement.
I've just seen, so colleges has come down to 12 years, so that's come down from 15 to 12, is that correct? Yeah, that's
that
the same reduction, yeah.
Yes.
Item 10, Jo.
Thank you. So this is the annual business plan brought to the board for consideration and is attached at Appendix A. This sets out the objectives of the fund, some of the key statistics on funding level and cash flow, resources and the budget, which is profiled following a request from the committee last year. Sets out the key tasks for the year ahead and does a look back on those that were set last year to update on progress, and also identifies the key risks for the fund and a forward plan of meetings. So looking at the tasks, there's been a lot of work done over the last year, but generally progress has been very good on the tasks, and where they haven't progressed, that's generally been outside of the control of the team. We've added 2 new tasks for this financial year. The review of the committee's requirements for independent advice, to wait until that comes, having seen the good governance review, and then to take whatever action is required to meet those needs of the committee. And the second task is calling off the national frameworks for custody services as the contract with our current custodian expires on the 31st of March 2024. And we'll bring the updates as required to the board for information and consideration as needed. The forward plan at the end just sets out the expected meeting agendas for both the committee and the board for the coming year, but obviously that's very flexible and there will be additional papers and or training added as and when required. So I'll happily take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? No. No? Oh, no. I thought it was a very, very good document, very concise, Jo. So well done. So the recommendation, Pension Board Committee, Pension Board, note the report and review the Lincolnshire Pension Fund Business Plan, which we've done.
Thank you. The report covers the preparation of the pension fund accounts and timings for the year ended 31st of March 2023. The report also brings an update from the external auditor on the 21-22 audit and their plans for the 2022-23. Their actual audit strategy memorandum for this year, it was not ready in time for this meeting, so will be presented at the board meeting in July. The report recommends that the board invite John Presley from Mazars to attend that meeting and present that report. In terms of preparation of the accounts, there have not been any changes to accounting standards or to the guidance set out in the Code of Practice for pension funds. So the accounts and accounting policies for 2022-23 will remain the same as were used last year. There are two key dates for publishing pension fund information. The first of these is the date relating to the annual report, which is set out at Regulation 34 of the LGPS Administration Regulations. And this requires the annual report to be published by the 1st of December each year. And this is in line with the requirements last year. The Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015 require that just the accounts are prepared and published in draft along with the county councils for public inspection by the 31st of May. And this is a move back to the original statutory deadline, which had been extended in the previous 2 financial years to take account of such things as pressures from the COVID-19 pandemic. And we do not anticipate that there will be any issues for the pension fund achieving these deadlines. The external auditor has provided an update on the 21-22 audit, and the auditor has completed the vast majority of their work and expect to issue an unqualified opinion at the same time as they issue this for the County Council. Mazars are currently reviewing the infrastructure assets within the County Council's accounts and will give the opinions at the same time when this work is concluded. For 22-23 audit, the external auditor expects materiality and the significant risks to remain the same as they were for this year. And that is materiality of 1% and significant risks to the pension fund being management override of controls and the valuation of unquoted assets. Their report also sets out expected timescales for completing their audit work, some of which is already planned to be completed after the statutory audit sign-off deadline, which is the end of September. Because of this, we would propose that the Pension Board invite the external auditor to the July meeting to present their audit strategy memorandum and to explain the work that they're going to complete and its timings. I'm very happy to take any questions on the report.
A couple of things I didn't realise until this morning. So the 21-22 accounts haven't been signed off. That's a council issue with infrastructure, is it? Sorry? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So the 2 opinions need to be given at the same time. There was some very late guidance. I don't know if you want me to keep speaking. I can. There was some very late guidance issued on infrastructure assets within the upper tier authorities. And that delayed Mazars wanting to give an opinion, but also required the council to go back and revisit that and prepare some more information for the auditors.
And the other thing, it just seems crazy that the audit plan is beyond the period. I mean, if there's issues with the current accounts, that's happened, but to plan for a late audit just seems, I know you're going to have the guy here in July or whatever, but it just seems crazy that that's a plan, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and we asked very clearly this year, and the County Council as well, to understand when work was going to be completed. The message coming to officers from audit is that quality and the quality of their audit is the most important thing. They don't view that end of September date as a deadline. They view completing quality work as the most important thing to them.
Why is it? Because the 1st of December is the publication date, isn't it? You keep quoting the end of September. Is that supposed to be the completion of the audit work? Is it? Or?
They form in 2 different parts. So the annual report must be published by the 1st of December. So that's the pension fund annual report, which includes the pension fund accounts, and that should be published by the 1st of December, including a consistency opinion from the external auditor. The accounts, which form part of the council's accounts, have a deadline for us of the 31st of May and the end of September for being a final version with the audit opinion in it.
I mean, isn't it just a question of the auditors? I appreciate the quality, but surely that's just a question of bringing resources in earlier, isn't it? Isn't it just as simple? It's not as simple as that, is it? Presumably.
I think it's as simple as that for us. That would be our expectation. That they have an expectation that we will meet all of the statutory deadlines that are set. I think it's probably best to let them explain in July what their thinking is. You can watch, Jerry. Yes.
I was going to say that it's a pity you won't be here. I know Mark wants to come in, but I'll comment on that afterwards. Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. I think I'm talking the same issues and concerns that Jerry has just mentioned, actually, with the auditors, the external auditors, and the fact that we're here. Well, we're nearly at the year end of 22-23, and we haven't even finished the audit of the accounts for 21-22 in terms of the audit work. And I know because I've discussed this with Michelle in relation to the wider LCC accounts, obviously of which the pension board accounts form a part. You know, when I was sort of trained as an accountant, yeah, we were talking. We went through all the accounting concepts of accruals and consistency, all that kind of stuff. But there's another important one there was timeliness, and it doesn't seem to me as if our auditors are being particularly timely. You know, obviously, you know, okay, they've got issues. Guidance has changed. Fair enough. And I know we're getting some new auditors for next financial year, but I must admit I have increasing concerns with the current auditors. I mean, I hope that when we go to the new ones, we haven't got this legacy of issues, because one of my big concerns now is the handover from the current external auditors to the new ones. And I'm just wondering, and I'm, should I say, somewhat uneasy about what's going on, and I just would like some reassurance that, you know, we're not sitting on a potential, well, crisis that's not that far away. Thanks.
Well, Mark, let me just make a few comments on that. I mean, I think we are sitting on a potential crisis for the whole of the public sector, because you might be concerned about Lincolnshire's accounts not being signed off in 21-22, but there are some accounts going back to, in fact, 2015-16. There's one authority's account not been signed off that year, and as at 31st of December, there are about over 600 sets of accounts not yet signed off, and as I say, some going back several years. The reasons put forward are the abolition of the Audit Commission back in about 2015, creation of the Public Sector Appointments Board, whatever it's called, and basically the fees were drummed down such a lot that, you know, several firms such as PwC and KPMG at the time just left the market. Insufficient auditors have been trained, so there is a huge shortage. And in terms of Mazars wanting longer than the, if you like, the timetable, I think it's the FRC have introduced various regulatory issues, and Mazars were fined actually, and so they're all very nervous, and the whole thing is just going to implode one of these days. But how authorities can actually kind of plan ahead when their accounts have not been signed off, that just amazes me. So there is a major issue, Mark, and I'll talk to you privately. I mean, this is a government issue, and it's time somebody actually spoke to the government to take some action. That's my personal view. But I'll talk to you offline on that one.
Yes, fine. Thanks, Roger.
mean, I think just taking those first points in terms of sort of governance for the fund, we are preparing accounts by the statutory timetables. We're presenting accounts for audit by those statutory deadlines. We are doing everything within our power to try and move those things forward. But we're also making an awful lot of that information public. So hopefully everything that we're doing gives you some comfort in some of those things. And certainly, I think Michelle can maybe give some more information about the preparations which are already underway for that move over to KPMG.
Yeah, so just some context to help with, to start with. So I think you're absolutely right. The audit sector in general has been very much stung by things like Patisserie Valerie, Carillion and all of that stuff. And FRC have been on their tails a bit hotter than they have been in previous years. Definitely the case with Mazars. They're making sure they're trying to dot all their I's and cross their T's, and that's more important to them than meeting our statutory deadlines. Absolutely more important to them than our professional pride, if you like. And I've been, you know, the recent conversation we've had with Mazars about the fact they're not even planning to meet the deadline for this year. I've expressed my disappointment in that. Don't, you know, we give assurance that we are trying to press them for that, and they have started the interim audit work for 22-23, even though, and they're still working on the 21-22 accounts. In terms of the 21-2 accounts, we've progressed. We've decided that our accounts meet the requirements of the code. Mazars aren't happy that we're not waving a "we can't do it" flag. We've asked them to audit us based on the fact that we think we are meeting the code. So they're currently working on that, and hopefully that will be resolved soon. We've had some initial discussions with KPMG. They've already introduced themselves to us, the audit manager, audit partner that will be managing the Lincolnshire account. They've given us assurance that in terms of capacity, they haven't bid for this work without the in-house resources already available. They've given up other contracts to make sure that they've got the capacity to deliver this work. So that gives some assurance. Just in terms of the government issue, so I'm just reading, actually, we've had a letter sent to the Section 151 and the Chief Exec 2 days ago from Catherine Francis, who is the Director General responsible for this area, and I think they're putting a great deal of faith on the new systems responsible body that's going to be taken over from FRC, in the near future, and they've set out their expectations from the local government to make sure we make that as smooth as possible in terms of us getting stuff done on time and meeting the statutory requirements, which we always do. So hope that gives some assurance. But I think 22-3 is going to be much of the same in terms of Mazars. Definitely, you know, not being pushed to meet their statutory reporting deadlines. So.
Thanks for that update, Michelle. And that's well, it's good to know that certain things are happening at national level.
It's a good point that Mark made about the transition. I mean, I had a lot more confidence in KPMG, having known Mazars previously and KPMG previously. I know we would have more confidence in, but the transition Mazars could be potentially be awkward in handing stuff out. I mean, it shouldn't be. I guess they're not allowed to be really, but it's an interesting point.
I think we'll definitely be dealing with one before we finish dealing with the other, so that will be a dynamic that will be interesting to kind of manage. But I know that KPMG are very much, you know, already engaging with us. Know that they'll have to engage with Mazars, and they're not looking to move staff, so that's kind of reassuring as well.
Can I just ask you whether Mazars will be auditing from home, or will they be coming in the office at this time?
I don't know what Claire's experience is to start with. I know they've definitely audited from home throughout COVID. Whether they're requesting to come into the office so much, I've not seen an auditor for years. So.
To be honest, the first year pre-COVID, we didn't see a great deal of people on site anyway. As Michelle said, the interim visit has been underway. I invited an auditor out to site last week, but they didn't take us up on that offer. I do believe some of these things will be done much easier face to face. So it was disappointing. However, it isn't. I suppose there are some difficulties with that, in as much as some of our services provided in Bradford anyway, rather than in Lincoln, and some of our services provided not on this site but at Serco's site. So coming to Lincoln doesn't entirely resolve that face-to-face issue, because not all of the work is actually carried out here in Lincoln.
If I could just mention the Grant Thornton work that we've initiated as well, because I know Councillor Whittington's been part of that work.
Yeah.
So we've got a requirement, LCC has got a requirement as part of the SIT for Financial Management Code to provide some assurance around our financial resilience. We've had Grant Thornton in, and they have actually physically been in as well, which is say I have seen one auditor then for the last few years, and they've interviewed a lot of people, collected a lot of evidence to do an assessment of our self-assessment of SIT for FM code, and I say Councillor Whittington's been part of that as well, giving his feedback from a member point of view and a finance portfolio support officer point of view as well. So hopefully that provides some additional assurance around the LCC position, even though our accounts haven't been audited.
Okay, thanks for that. Anything else on this one? There are 4 recommendations. So we're noting the changes required to the Statement of Accounts for 22-23. Note the changes to the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015. Consider the Statement of Accounting Policies for use in preparing the accounts for 31st March 2023. And note the update from the external auditor and invite them to the board meeting in July. Well, I'm sure we all want to see them in July. Sharp 9 I'm sounding. So. Happy with those recommendations? Yep. Very good. Thank you.
Yes.
So pension board membership. Joe, please.
Yes, thank you. So basically there are 2 appointments up for renewal in July this year, 1 scheme member representative and 1 employer representative. For the scheme member place, it's Kim's union position, and Kim has indicated that she wishes to stand for another term. So subject to local trade union agreement, this position will not change. The employer representative role currently taken by Jerry is also up for renewal, and Jerry has decided to step down at this time. Employers were made aware of this upcoming vacancy as part of a presentation that Jerry kindly did for us at the annual employer meeting in February to explain what the role was on the board. So a further email will be sent out to all employers in April to gain expressions of interest, and that will have a closing date of the 31st of May. Following that, the administering authority will select a suitable candidate to appoint ahead of the July board meeting. And before I take any questions, just on behalf of the fund, I'd like to say thank you very much, Jerry, for all the time and input that you've given over the last 4 years on the board. So thank you.
And I'd certainly like to endorse that. Yes, thank you very much. We're really sad to see you go, but you shouldn't have resigned from Boston College. Time served, presumably.
Yeah, well, that's the reason I'm stepping down. It's not because I want to step down from the board. It's because I have to step. Sorry, I don't have to step down, but I've decided to step down from Boston College next year. You can get another year out of me if you want, but obviously I can't do this job not being a governor of Boston College. But I've done 10 years at Boston College then, and I'm state pension age next year. I thought it's time to step back from that. But that's the only reason I'm stepping down from this. I enjoy this. Strangely enough, I enjoy this more than the Boston College, which I don't tell Boston College that, obviously, but just interested if you had any, and thank you, by the way, for the thank you, and I've really enjoyed the work here and the support from all of you, and particularly Joe and Claire and the team there. I mean, I think it's a fantastically well-run fund, to be honest. So, but have you had any expressions of interest?
Not yet. But given that only about 10 or so of our employers were represented on the annual employer meeting, some hopefully have seen it since, but no, not yet. But we'll do an email out to all strategic contacts, as I say, once we get into April.
Well, once again, Jerry, thanks ever so much. We will miss you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jerry.
So, a board recommendation is board consider and note the report, and perhaps you'll record our thanks to Jerry in the minutes, please, Rachel.
Thank you. This item is the board's normal opportunity to discuss training needs and review any training that's been attended during the last 3 months, and consider if there's any further areas that you'd like to be covered in the future. Board members are currently completing 2 online training courses. The first of these is the Pension Regulators Toolkit module on scams. And please can all board members send their certificate of completion through to me or Joe, as we need this to be able to sign up to the Pensions Pledge. And thank you to those of you who have already sent it through. You've also been provided with log-on details for the Hymans Robertson Online Learning Academy for you to look at and complete. And there's been a new element added to this very recently on the pensions dashboard into Module 6. And I'll now hand over to you to discuss any training matters.
Anybody want to volunteer?
A couple of things. I didn't realise, sorry, the pension scam training was more urgent than, obviously I now realise, and I'll do that the scam training, whatever it's called. I've done 5 modules of the Hymans Robertson. The module 6 is a sort of like an update on current issues. That is a required module as well, really, but obviously it's changing, sort of changes over time, yeah. But that's the only training. The only thing I would ask, I don't know it's possible, I've attended a lot of committee training sessions, and there was a presentation, I think, by Matt, which was classed as training as well. And there's no way that you or one of you could summarise in the last year, because I think my training log ran April to March, what are training sessions, what aren't, if you know what I mean, because there's been quite a few committee stroke board training sessions which I want to put on, but I'm not sure I'd recognise what was training and what wasn't without going back, and which I know is what you've got to do, I suppose, but thanks.
Dave?
Yeah, well, similarly, I've still got the pension regulator scams. I've not got to that. I've done, I think I'm on to the 3rd module of the, what's it called, Lola. Just as an excuse, and it is an excuse, my iPad is not now supporting the whole, so I know it's a good excuse, but it doesn't support it. So I've had to find an alternative way in. So that it's just it doesn't allow me to put my training log on, for example. It's those sort of things that I'm struggling with. So if you can't see it, it's not because I'm not trying to put it on. I've not really done anything, if I may say. I've not done anything formally in the last 3 months on training, other than I do read what comes through from you, and I do see we get the emails and sort of things like that. So it's not that I'm not looking at it, I'm just not at any formal training events. I was only talking to Roger just to update you about the Birmingham one. It's the one for the board that's in Birmingham. It's just the location that's awkward, I feel, to be there for what, 10 o'clock? So I'm not registered for that, but I will look to go to the, what is it, the Border to Coast will be probably something that I'd look forward to.
Yeah, and we can happily feed that back to CITFA. I think they've probably listened to people who don't want to go into London and have moved it to Birmingham. But yeah, I agree, Birmingham is quite a difficult place to get to from here.
It would be difficult. I think I said to Roger, it would nearly have to be like an overnight sort of hotel to get from Lincoln. Even to drive from Lincoln to get there for a 10 o'clock start would be quite a challenge. So I've not registered for that.
Yeah, I mean, you might just feed that one back, Claire, because I mean they've chosen Manchester and Birmingham, and both are nightmares from here. Yeah, because you go by train to Manchester, you go down to Sheffield and hang around, and
yeah, and that's no problem. I'll feed that back to them in terms of the location, and perhaps for the next round they'll pick some different locations.
Yeah. I mean, thanks, Claire. In terms of the Birmingham one, I agree, because if I travel from Grantham to Birmingham on the train from Grantham station, I have to change at Nottingham, and it's a 2.5 hour trip round. But interestingly, if I prepare to drive the 15 miles to Melton, I can get on a train from Stansted Airport that goes into Birmingham, New Street, and actually takes from Melton into New Street is just over an hour, so it's not so bad, but it's still a little inconvenient to be there for 10 o'clock in the morning into Birmingham.
just to mention my update. So I've done the scams training. Did I send the certificate in? Oh, I sent that. Right, good. I've done 3 of the, what's it called, the Lolas. I have to say, I don't find that user-friendly, actually. They're pretty boring presenters. But I will try and complete the other 2 by the 31/3. I didn't do anything in the December quarter because I was moving house, one thing and another, so I didn't do any of them. But having done modules 1 to 3, I do find them a bit heavy.
If I can just mention, Hyman's Robertson are updating their online academy, and I'll be bringing something to July's meeting. We'll need to move across to their new platform by the end of the calendar year, but we can decide when we do that. But it would be appreciated if everyone had completed the current learning by that time. But I will be bringing a paper to July giving more detail about we have fed quite a bit of feedback to Hyman's on Lola, but I'll be bringing a paper in July giving a better explanation of exactly what they're doing once they've sent more information. Just the other thing to mention, Dave, with your iPad issue, I have raised the question with IT because of the fact that they are no longer wishing to hand out paper copies of papers. As to whether or not co-opted members should be provided with a device, because the issue we have in going to people's private emails is size of files. Then there's also the issue when it's exempt items and where that's going. So earlier this week I have raised that question with IT when they've been looking at IT requirements as to what, I don't know what happens on other committees that have co-opted members, but I have raised that question for you, so we'll keep you informed once we get a response on that.
I mean, it sounds a rather poor excuse, but it is a genuine issue I have that my IT, my home IT, I've had to effectively get a new. I've gone for a laptop to actually now because it's just that it's old technology, or my laptop is dated. But it'll be useful. Yeah, it'd be useful if I could have, something like that.
It's a wider issue if it's going to people's personal email addresses and personal laptops that other people may use. And if we have got exempt items on there, then it does raise a kind of an information assurance question. So as I say, I've raised that and we'll get back once I hear on that.
Yeah, I think Joe, the answer to that obviously is if people have got council provided devices, they members and cooperative members can be given access to the mod.gov app, and then we'll be able to see exempt papers as well.
Just to finish, I've done 1 or 2 other things. So one of the best ones I went to was a pension trustee circle, which is kind of a 24-hour conference, and that covered everything. That was really good, but it was obviously geared much towards the private sector. I did 3 RSMs as well. They were RSM being the auditors, which was pretty good. What's on the horizon for covenant assessment, an interview with the regulator, pension sector technical update, things like that. But anyway, I'll send it all in to you, Claire. So, anything else on this one? So, we need to think about whether there's any specific training we want. Anyone feel there's any particular thing that they... Don't look at you. Well, silence is gold. Well done is all I can say. God, I did find them boring.
Sorry, all I was going to say, it's difficult to actually pinpoint something that we could have a training sort of session on. I mean, what we seem to get, if I may bring you in on that, Matt, you bring sort of items and will give a presentation. I mean, they're very, very useful, and I find them quite helpful. So it's similar items like that, Matt, that I feel that I benefit from, to hear from the likes of yourself, from, if I may say, from within the administrator's point of view.
Well, it's good that they're useful. Thank you. It's always encouraging. I could think of two things off the top of my head. Care revaluation, because pensions increase this year for our care scheme, will move from the 1st of April to the 6th of April. What that means, what we're avoiding, and the disaster we've avoided on annual allowance with that this year. I'm doing that to something similar for the West Yorkshire Board next week. And the other thing that I saw and then has disappeared, so something for later on in the year, it may be the last thing of age discrimination. I believe the death grant, the age 75 cap is to be removed. Yes, the bad news is it's being removed retrospectively to 2011. Yeah, so once I know more about that, there are two potential topics you might be interested in. I mean, again, so those. The only other thing, just as a comment really, because I know you do all the regulator toolkit stuff, having had conversations with the regulator recently, because we're doing quite a bit of work with them, they think both toolkits should be completed. So you've got the public sector, which is 7 modules, and then you've got the wider toolkit, which includes investments and stuff, which is 9 modules. And they believe they should be completed. That's, yeah, I've heard that from Nick Gannon and from Sarah Dove. Yeah, so have I. So we're in the good books. But as I said, it's a comment. I haven't asked West Yorkshire Board to do that because it feels quite heavy, but that's a recent expectation.
Sorry. If pension committee members and board members do the fundamentals course, I mean, after that, those 3 days, I thought they were brilliant, they were. But it's now on webinar, isn't it?
If I can just add, though, I think it does need to be remembered, and TPR perhaps needs to think about that as well if they're suggesting that the board's remit is admin and governance. Yep. And asking them to suddenly start understanding all the investment stuff, it's a huge ask. And I'd also be interested, I don't know if when you have your future talks with them, about whether or not there'll be a new toolkit coming out when the combined code is finalised for the LGPS, because that, I think, will be more beneficial.
I think I've been in the room and they've been asked that question, and I don't think they really answered it. I don't think they know yet, Joe, but it would seem appropriate, you know, because at the moment they do review things and they add things like the scams. I think actually, particularly for boards like this who've done all that, it would be quite refreshing to see something new aligned with the new code of practice whenever that is released.
Exactly. Claire, you might just want to feed into SITFA. I mean, I find, you know, that we've talked about Birmingham and Manchester. I mean, the agenda is just kind of repetitive, and you know, much as Roger Phillips is a very good speaker and what have you, I mean, it's just the same old stuff, and you know, the guy who used to be at the LGA, sorry, Jeff. Yeah. And you look at it and I think, you know what, I'm not really going to spend 2-3 hours getting to Birmingham to listen to that.
And we can happily go back on that as well. That's not a problem. In terms of the other bits of training, you still have on the list which Joe's already touched on, the Pension Regulators Combined Code, and we'll obviously bring that when we can. And the other thing that we wondered if you would be interested in is in the meeting in July for the committee, we're going to do some training on the annual report and accounts. So take the committee through the document, highlight some of the very interesting things that there are in there, and give them a little bit more detail about where some of it comes from. And you, obviously, as a board, you're very welcome to attend that, but equally that's something that we could put on for the board in the afternoon as well if you were interested in that.
I think that would be very good.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
In that case, then we'll put that training in for July, and then those other areas that have been raised will build into the work programmes over the coming next few meetings. Okay.
Right, so in terms of recommendations, we've shared information, we've done that. We've noted any conference and training feedback from the previous 3 months, and we've considered further training requirements, and we're going to feed those in. Very good.
And that's me, and we've spoilt that a little bit by some of the conversation that we've just had. But it's your normal opportunity to discuss the work plan, and the current work plan can be found at Appendix A. So if we look just at the next meeting, we'll start with the appointment of the new board members. We have the normal quarterly items of fund update and admin update, the twice yearly update on the pension regulator's data scores, and then as well as that we'll have the draft annual report and accounts and the pensions regulator's combined code if it's available, although it feels like that probably won't be. And then we'll run that training on the annual report and accounts.
The only thing the Leeds visit is in June, isn't it? Just wondering whether we ought to have borders to coast on from the governance angle, particularly if they're going to give us a presentation.
Would it be sensible to have that picked up in June, and then following on for that meeting, if you want to invite them down, we can get that maybe into their diary now, penciled in, and then if you want them to come following on from that, if you feel that you want to see them in the public forum, or if there's further issues that you want to pick up, does that seem like a reasonable approach? Yeah.
And actually, if I can just add on to that, I think the timing would be good because obviously they've completed the governance review, the new shareholder agreement, the new Articles Association, and everything has been signed off now. I think pretty much most of the partner funds have finalised that, so there can potentially be some update on that. What they haven't done is updated the governance charter, because that will be done next year. But absolutely, that times well given the governance review that has been undertaken.
Yeah.
So the June, sorry, I'll ask you. So the June visit to Border to Coast predates the board and the meeting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the committee meeting is in the June.
It's both.
It's both. So the June has a committee as well as a training.
The meeting in June, the change to the committee structure is that every single meeting if you remember in the past we had 4 quarterly meetings, 2 training meetings and 2 manager presentation meetings. They are now all going to, 4 of them are going to cover investments and stewardship, and the other 4 are going to cover admin and governance, so that all 8 of those sessions will include some meeting, some training and some manager presentations. So rather than having it split into distinct different events, that they will all have a little bit of everything at all of them. So yeah, so June will be an investment and stewardship meeting, followed by a manager presentation from Border to Coast, and then an opportunity for Border to Coast to give to the committee and any board that attend some training and some more information about any areas of particular interest. And we've already had expressed some interest in things like compliance and their audit regime and that type of thing.
Thank you.
Will the June meeting be available virtually, or is it just in person?
Yeah, can we come back on that, because we will have to check. Because I'm not sure if they will be able to do all of it virtually, but we will check on that.
Right, so in terms of the work programme, recommendation is review the board's future work programme, highlight any activity for inclusion in the work programme. So, yeah, done that. Item 15. Matt, I think we've got to ask you to leave at this point, please.
Chip off, really, don't I? So I'm hoping it's just au revoir. But anyway, thanks for your time.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm going to. Do you want me to read all this out? Yes. All right. So, item 15, consideration of exempt information in accordance with section 100A, brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972. Agenda item 16 has not been circulated to the press and public on the grounds that it is considered to contain exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. The press and public may be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of this item of business. All in favour?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.